Why are Jews and Arabs always at war? Why does conflict seem to follow these two peoples across centuries, even spilling over into conflicts among Muslim countries themselves? To truly understand this tension, we must go far back, thousands of years, to a moment when the destiny of nations was decided in the tents of a wandering shepherd named Abraham. Abraham's story begins with a promise that seems impossible. In the world of the ancient Middle East, family and legacy meant everything. Yet, Abraham and his wife Sarah were childless, and their old age made the prospect of children look more like a dream than a possibility. But into this impossible situation, God spoke, "I will make you into a great nation, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you." To Abraham, this wasn't just good news, it was a lifeline. Yet, year after year, the promise remained unfulfilled, and the weight of disappointment pressed down on Abraham and especially on Sarah. In their culture, barrenness was considered a curse, a personal shame. For Sarah, it was a daily wound. How could she be a princess, as her new God-given name implied, if she could not provide an heir for Abraham? Her faith was tested to its breaking point. Desperate for a solution, Sarah turned to the customs of her day. She gave her Egyptian servant Hagar to Abraham, hoping that, through Hagar, she could at least secure Abraham a child. This desperate decision would have consequences that echoed through the ages. Hagar became pregnant, but instead of joy, jealousy and resentment filled the household. The Bible tells us that Sarah began to mistreat Hagar, and in her distress, Hagar fled into the wilderness. Alone and afraid, she was met by a messenger from God, an angel who spoke hope and destiny over her unborn son. "You are to name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard your misery. He will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him, and he will live in hostility toward all his brothers." Let's pause for a moment. That last sentence is astonishing, not only because of its honesty, but because of how accurately it seems to describe headlines even today. The prophecy given to Hagar was not meant as an insult. In ancient times, the wild donkey was a symbol of unbreakable freedom, wildness, and survival. It spoke of a people who could never be truly tamed, who would carve out their destiny in a hostile world. But with that gift came a warning. Ishmael's descendants would live in perpetual conflict, not just with outsiders, but even among themselves. Hagar returned and gave birth to Ishmael. For 13 years, Ishmael was Abraham's only son, the center of his world, his hopes, his future. In that boy, Abraham saw the answer to his prayers and the beginning of God's promise. Yet, deep within the story was a growing tension, the seed of a future split that neither Abraham nor his household could foresee. Just when it seemed that Ishmael would be Abraham's only heir, God intervened again. Against all human expectations, Sarah, now nearly 90 years old, became pregnant. She gave birth to Isaac, whose name means "he will laugh," a bittersweet reminder of the disbelief that had filled both his parents' hearts when God repeated his promise. This miraculous birth changed everything. Suddenly, Abraham had two sons, one born from human effort and desperation, and the other a direct result of divine intervention and promise. From this moment on, the paths of the two brothers began to diverge. The celebration of Isaac's weaning became the breaking point. Sarah saw Ishmael mocking Isaac, a moment charged with more than childish rivalry. In the Hebrew, the word used for mocking carries the same root as Isaac's name, suggesting that Ishmael was challenging his younger brother's claim, perhaps asserting his own right as the firstborn. For Sarah, it was the final straw. She demanded that Abraham send Hagar and Ishmael away, insisting that slave woman's son will never share in the inheritance with my son Isaac. Abraham's heart broke, but God assured him that while the covenant would continue through Isaac, Ishmael would also be blessed and become the father of a great nation. Yet the damage was done. Abraham sent Hagar and Ishmael into the wilderness, a heartbreaking moment that marked the physical and spiritual separation of two peoples who would, from then on, walk parallel paths, often marked by misunderstanding and conflict. In this single family drama, the seeds of centuries of strife were sown. The division between Isaac and Ishmael became not only a matter of genealogy, but a living prophetic pattern, a blueprint for the storms that would shake the Middle East for millennia. And though the world often sees only the outer conflict, the Bible invites us to remember that behind every war, every border, every rivalry, there is first a story of promise, heartbreak, and the longing to belong. To truly grasp why the conflict between Jews and Arabs has lasted for millennia, we need to understand how deeply both peoples see their history, not just as a record of the past, but as a prophetic blueprint for their future. In the world of the Bible, nothing is accidental. Every story, every relationship, and every event is loaded with meaning. For Jews, there's an ancient principle known as Ma'aseh Avot Siman Lebanim. The deeds of the fathers are signs for the children. What happened to Abraham, Isaac, and Ishmael was not just about them. It was a preview of what would happen to all who came after. This idea that the patriarchs' lives foreshadow the fate of their descendants is woven throughout Jewish tradition. Every hardship Abraham faced, every triumph Isaac enjoyed, every wound Ishmael suffered became a living symbol. The patterns established in their stories would play out again and again in the generations that followed. If Abraham experienced exile, so would Israel. If Ishmael was sent away, but not abandoned, so too would the Arab peoples wander, yet endure. But this isn't just a Jewish insight. Christianity, too, picks up this thread with its own doctrine of typology, the belief that figures and events in the Old Testament are shadows pointing to future realities. The Apostle Paul, writing centuries later, taught that stories like those of Isaac and Ishmael held deeper meaning, teaching spiritual truths for generations to come. He famously interpreted Isaac, the child of promise, as a symbol of the spiritual inheritance through faith, while Ishmael represented reliance on human effort. For Christians, these stories are not just history, they're prophecy in motion. These principles matter because they shape how both Jews and Arabs view themselves and each other. In this symbolic framework, Sarah and Isaac stand for the Jewish people, the heirs of the covenant, chosen through a miraculous promise. Hagar and Ishmael, in both Jewish tradition and especially Islamic belief, come to represent the Arab and Muslim peoples, blessed resilient, but outsiders to the original covenant, yet never outside God's care. This symbolic reading brings a new light to the ancient conflict. It's not just about territory or politics. It's about identity, about who truly inherits the promise, who is the real child of Abraham. Every headline, every negotiation, every flare-up in the Middle East echoes these ancient stories. When Jewish settlers plant vineyards on West Bank hills, or when Palestinians invoke the memory of Ishmael, both sides are drawing on thousands of years of biblical memory, consciously or not. It's here, too, that prophecy becomes personal. When God spoke to Hagar in the wilderness, He didn't just promise survival. He spoke words that would echo through Ishmael's lineage forever. He will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him, and he will live in hostility toward all his brothers. This prophecy, often misunderstood, was never meant as a curse. The wild donkey was a symbol of fierce independence, resilience, and the ability to survive against all odds, a spirit still seen in Arab cultures today. Yet, the words also warned of a life marked by struggle, both with outsiders and within their own ranks. On the other side, Isaac's story becomes the story of miracle, covenant, and laughter after despair. The fact that Isaac was born to a barren woman and an old man is in itself a prophecy, a sign that God's promises are fulfilled not by human effort, but by divine intervention. This theme, repeated throughout Jewish history, becomes a source of identity and pride, but also the root of jealousy, misunderstanding, and sometimes persecution from surrounding peoples. Even the names of the patriarchs are pregnant with meaning. Ishmael means God hears, a reminder that God did not abandon Hagar or her son. Isaac means he laughs, recalling the astonishment and even disbelief with which his parents greeted the news of his birth. Every name is a signpost, every event a lesson for the ages. Over centuries, these symbolic patterns became the lens through which both Jews and Arabs viewed their destinies. The exile and wandering of Ishmael's children became the story of Arab tribes, forever seeking a place in the world. The miraculous survival of Isaac's line, despite endless threats, became the goal of Jewish self-understanding, and the inability of the two brothers to share an inheritance in peace became a prophetic warning that echoes in every new eruption of violence. Yet, the biblical stories also plant the seeds of hope. The same patterns that predict struggle also hint at the possibility of reconciliation, a future where the deeds of the fathers might one day be redeemed by the choices of the children. The story is not finished, and the symbolism is never static. It waits for each generation to write its own chapter, perhaps even to choose a different ending. In the next part, we'll dive deeper into how the original conflict began, the promises and heartbreaks that shaped both Isaac and Ishmael, and how their destinies were forever intertwined, not just by blood, but by the words and symbols that would define nations. The rivalry that would shape the fate of nations did not begin with a battlefield, but within a family chosen by God, yet not immune to the pain of human longing and disappointment. At the heart of the story is Abraham, a man who trusted in a promise that seemed impossible, and two women Sarah and Hagar, each with her own heartbreak, hope, and destiny. It all started with God's audacious pledge to Abraham, "I will make you into a great nation, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you." But the years passed, and Sarah's womb remained silent. Each month without a child deepened her sense of shame. In a culture where motherhood was seen as a woman's highest calling, Sarah's barrenness was a daily ache, a wound that would not heal. Driven by desperation and the customs of the day, Sarah made a fateful decision. She offered her servant Hagar to Abraham as a surrogate, hoping that through Hagar she might finally give Abraham an heir. What began as a practical solution quickly became a source of strife. When Hagar conceived, she looked down on Sarah, and Sarah responded with harshness and resentment. The household, once united by a shared dream, became a place of jealousy, competition, and pain. The Bible describes how Hagar, overwhelmed by Sarah's mistreatment, ran away into the wilderness. Alone, frightened, and pregnant, she found herself beside a spring. There, in her lowest moment, an angel of the Lord appeared, not with condemnation, but with compassion. "Return to your mistress and submit to her," the angel said. "I will increase your descendants so much that they will be too numerous to count." Hagar was told to name her son Ishmael, meaning God hears, for God had heard her misery. Yet the angel's message included a prophecy that would echo through history. He will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him. And he will live in hostility toward all his brothers. These words, often misunderstood, are not a curse but a description of Ishmael's fierce independence, his resilience, and his struggle to find belonging in a world that often pushed him away. Hagar returned and gave birth to Ishmael. For years, he was Abraham's only son, the answer to years of prayer and waiting. Abraham loved Ishmael deeply. In Ishmael, Abraham saw both fulfillment and hope for the future. Yet, beneath the surface, a storm was brewing. When Abraham was 99 and Sarah nearly as old, God visited Abraham again. This time, he announced that Sarah herself would bear a son, a true miracle. Sarah, listening from behind the tent flap, laughed in disbelief. "After I'm worn out and my Lord is old, will I now have this pleasure?" Yet, just as God promised, Sarah conceived and gave birth to Isaac. His name, he laughs, forever recalled the joy and astonishment of his arrival. With Isaac's birth, the family's fragile peace shattered. At a feast celebrating Isaac's weaning, Sarah saw Ishmael mocking Isaac. The Hebrew word for mocking is a play on Isaac's name, suggesting that Ishmael was challenging his little brother's status as heir, perhaps asserting his own right as firstborn. For Sarah, this was intolerable. Fearing for Isaac's inheritance, she demanded that Abraham send Hagar and Ishmael away. Abraham was torn. His love for Ishmael ran deep, and the thought of casting out his son broke his heart. Yet God reassured Abraham that while Isaac would inherit the covenant, Ishmael would also become a great nation. With heavy steps, Abraham sent Hagar and Ishmael into the wilderness, giving them only bread and water. This was more than a family tragedy. It was the first great separation, a moment that marked the beginning of two destinies running parallel yet divided. Ishmael and his mother wandered in the desert, nearly perishing from thirst. But God did not forget them. An angel showed Hagar a well, and Ishmael survived. God renewed his promise. I will make him into a great nation. The pain of this separation lingers in the collective memory of both peoples. For the descendants of Ishmael, the Arab world, this story is one of rejection and resilience, of being pushed out yet blessed to survive and thrust. For the descendants of Isaac, the Jewish people, it is the story of a miraculous promise, a covenant secured, but at the cost of family and unity. Every generation since has felt the echo of this first conflict. The longing to belong, the fear of being replaced, the hope for blessing, and the ache of division. The story of Abraham's sons is not just ancient history. It is a living drama played out in every headline, every negotiation, every prayer for peace. It all began with a promise, a struggle, and a heartbreaking choice, one that still shapes the destinies of millions to this very day. The birth of Isaac did not just fulfill a miraculous promise. It set in motion a profound division that would ripple across history, shaping the destinies of nations and the very core of personal and collective identity. In that ancient tent, when Sarah first held her long-awaited child, joy and fear mingled together. What did this miracle mean for Ishmael, the son who had, until then, been Abraham's sole hope? Sarah's delight was shadowed by insecurity. She knew that Isaac's arrival changed everything, not only in her own heart, but in the order of the family, and as time would show, the fate of entire peoples. In the ancient world, the birthright was sacred. It wasn't just about inheritance of property, it was about legacy, blessing, and the family's spiritual future. Isaac's existence seemed to threaten Ishmael's place, and this tension could not be hidden for long. The conflict came to a head at a celebration for Isaac's weaning, a pivotal moment marking his survival through infancy and entry into the next stage of childhood. During the feast, Sarah saw Ishmael, now a teenager, mocking Isaac. In the Hebrew language, this word is a pun on Isaac's own name, suggesting more than simple teasing. It implies a challenge, a subtle assertion of status, perhaps even a threat to the new heir's place. Sarah's maternal instincts, sharpened by years of pain and waiting, would not allow even a hint of rivalry. Her reaction was swift and absolute. "Get rid of that slave woman and her son," she demanded of Abraham, "for that slave woman's son will never share in the inheritance with my son Isaac." Abraham was devastated. The Bible says the matter distressed him greatly because of his son. Ishmael was not only the child of his body, but of his heart, his firstborn, the answer to years of longing. Yet the choice was forced upon him. Secure the promise through Isaac, or try to keep peace with Ishmael at the risk of losing everything God had pledged. God's answer, though difficult, was clear. "Do not be so distressed about the boy and your servant," he told Abraham. "Listen to whatever Sarah tells you, because it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. I will make the son of the slave into a nation also, because he is your offspring." With a heavy heart, Abraham obeyed, sending Hagar and Ishmael away with only bread and water an act of obedience, but also of unimaginable pain. This act wasn't just a family drama. It became the blueprint for an epic narrative of exile, rejection, and resilience. For Ishmael and his descendants, the wilderness became both a punishment and a promise, a place of struggle, but also the seedbed for a great nation. The pain of expulsion was never forgotten. In many Arab and Muslim traditions, the story of Hagar and Ishmael's journey into the desert is retold with a sense of dignity and triumph. They were cast out, but they survived, protected by God Himself. For the descendants of Isaac, the story took on a different meaning. Isaac was the child of the covenant, the living proof that God could do the impossible. Every Jewish generation would look back to this moment as the foundation of their unique relationship with the divine, a people set apart, chosen, and destined to carry a special blessing. Yet, this chosenness came with a heavy price, a legacy of rivalry, jealousy, and often conflict with those from whom they had been separated. This ancient separation foreshadowed countless exiles, dispersions, and struggles for a sense of belonging. The story of Hagar and Ishmael wandering in the wilderness, nearly perishing from thirst before being saved by an angel in a hidden well, echoes in the experience of every people who have felt displaced, unwanted, or forced to start anew. The sense of loss, the fear of being erased, and the longing for recognition became central to the identity of both groups. The pattern would repeat itself through history. In the modern era, the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948 and the displacement of Palestinian families was experienced by many Arabs as a new Nakba, a catastrophe that revived the pain of Hagar and Ishmael's expulsion. The parallels are striking. Sudden loss, wandering, a search for home, and a hope for justice or return. For many, these ancient stories are not distant myths, but living memories, shaping how they see themselves and each other. At the same time, for the Jewish people, the return to the land of their ancestors was seen as the fulfillment of the ancient covenant, a miracle of survival and restoration against all odds. The pain of the past, centuries of exile, persecution, and longing found meaning in the promise first spoken to Abraham. Through Isaac, your offspring will be reckoned. Yet, behind every political struggle and every headline, the shadow of this first family drama remains. The story is a reminder that identity and inheritance are never just legal or material. They are spiritual, emotional, and deeply personal. The deepening divide that began in Abraham's household still echoes in our world today. Understanding its roots is not just an exercise in history, but a call to empathy, a reminder that every conflict carries within it a memory of love, loss, and the longing to belong. So Isaac and Ishmael's lives unfold. The ancient story takes on new layers of meaning that would resonate for generations. The core of the conflict is no longer just about family. It becomes a struggle for spiritual inheritance, a contest to answer a question that still echoes today. Who is the true heir of Abraham's promise? This isn't a simple matter of birth order or family preference. At its heart is the mysterious concept of the covenant, a binding sacred agreement between God and Abraham's line. In the biblical narrative, Isaac is chosen as the son through whom the covenant would pass. This is not because he is Abraham's firstborn that honor belongs to Ishmael, but because his birth itself was miraculous, a direct act of divine intervention in a world where hope seemed lost. The Bible stresses that Isaac's arrival came not by human planning, but by God's power alone. For Ishmael, the story is bittersweet. He is not the child of the covenant, yet he is not forgotten by God. Repeatedly, God reassures Abraham of Ishmael's future. "And for Ishmael, I have heard you. I will surely bless him. I will make him fruitful and will greatly increase his numbers. He will be the father of 12 rulers, and I will make him into a great nation." Ishmael's descendants would become powerful and numerous, a prophecy that, for many, finds its fulfillment in the rise of the Arab peoples, their empires, and their global influence. But why did God's promise go through Isaac and not Ishmael? The answer remains, ultimately, a mystery of divine election. The Bible describes it not as a reward for merit, but as a result of God's will. It is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. Later, this idea would become central to Jewish self-understanding. Being chosen is not a guarantee of comfort, but a calling to bear witness to God's faithfulness, even through suffering, exile, and hardship. This division of blessing and covenant is echoed in the Quran, but with a dramatic twist. While the Torah and the Christian Old Testament present Isaac as the intended heir and the son Abraham nearly sacrificed, Islamic tradition identifies Ishmael as the true spiritual successor. The Quran tells of Abraham's willingness to sacrifice his son as a supreme act of faith, but does not explicitly name which son. However, Islamic tradition overwhelmingly regards Ishmael as the one on the altar. This narrative shift has profound consequences. By placing Ishmael in the central role, Islam reclaims the spiritual inheritance for itself, connecting the Prophet Muhammad directly to Abraham through Ishmael's line. This is more than just a historical disagreement. It shapes how two of the world's largest faiths understand their place in God's story. For Jews and Christians, Isaac is the miracle child and the line of promise. For Muslims, Ishmael is the son who proved his and his father's faith through obedience, and whose descendants would ultimately carry God's final message to the world. The result is a rivalry that is not just about land or lineage, but about truth and legitimacy. The question, whose story is true, is played out in sacred geography, holy texts, and even in politics. The struggle for Jerusalem, for example, is not simply a contest for territory. The Temple Mount is both the site of the ancient Jewish temple and the place where, according to Islamic tradition, the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven. It's a physical embodiment of the deeper question, which story stands on this ground? Yet, in both traditions, there is a recognition of blessing, even in division. Ishmael, though sent away, is not cursed. He is heard by God, provided for, and made into a nation. Isaac, though chosen, inherits a legacy of responsibility and sometimes persecution. Each brother's path reflects a different kind of promise, one spiritual, the other worldly. Both are real, both are lasting. Over centuries, these differences became more than just religious disputes. They were woven into the very fabric of identity and national destiny. Jewish identity would center on the covenant, the experience of exile and return, the miracle of survival against all odds. Arab and Muslim identity would draw from the story of Ishmael, the dignity of the outcast, the blessing of survival in the desert, the legacy of faith proven through trial. As history moved forward, the rivalry intensified, fueled by sacred memory and prophecy. Yet, even here, the stories contain the seeds of hope. The God who chose Isaac did not abandon Ishmael. Both lines were blessed, both had a future, and both carried forward a piece of Abraham's faith. The journey of inheritance, rivalry, and blessing is far from over. The descendants of Isaac and Ishmael continued to live out their intertwined destinies. The past is not simply a story to be remembered, it is a living reality that shapes every new chapter, a legacy of faith, struggle, and the hope that one day the promises made to both brothers might find their ultimate fulfillment. As the destinies of Isaac and Ishmael's descendants continued to unfold, their rivalry became etched not just in family memory or scripture, but in the very stones and soil of the land they both called home. Nowhere is this more dramatically evident than in Jerusalem, a city sacred to Jews, Muslims, and Christians alike, but claimed with a unique passion by the children of both Isaac and Ishmael. For the Jewish people, Jerusalem is the heartbeat of faith. It is the city King David captured and declared the capital of ancient Israel, the place where Solomon built the magnificent temple that would become the center of worship and national identity. According to Jewish tradition, the most sacred spot in all Jerusalem is the Temple Mount, where Abraham prepared to sacrifice Isaac, where the Ark of the Covenant once rested, and where the Holy of Holies served as the spiritual center of the world. To stand in Jerusalem, to pray at the Western Wall, the last remnant of the ancient temple's retaining walls, is to touch the story of the covenant with God. But Jerusalem is not a Jewish city alone. For Muslims, it is Al-Quds, the holy, and ranks as the third most sacred city in Islam after Mecca and Medina. At the very heart of the Temple Mount stands the Golden Dome of the Rock, a masterpiece of Islamic architecture and spirituality. According to Islamic tradition, it was from the foundation stone beneath the dome that the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven during the miraculous night journey led by the angel Gabriel and accompanied by his faithful steed, Al-Buraq. Just steps away is the Al-Aqsa Mosque, another revered site where Muslims from around the world gather for prayer. This convergence of sacred memory is no accident. The Bible and Quran both place Abraham at the center of these stories, but the details differ, each tradition claiming the most significant moments and places as their own. The Temple Mount thus becomes more than just a hill of ancient stones. It is a battleground for meaning, a living symbol of whose story will prevail. It is not just the structures themselves that are contested, but what lies beneath and around them. The Western Wall, so central to Jewish prayer and longing, is in Muslim tradition the place where Muhammad tethered his steed before ascending to heaven. The Dome of the Rock for Jews sits on the very ground where their temple once stood, while for Muslims it marks the site of a miracle that affirms their connection to Abraham and his son Ishmael. Every stone in Jerusalem seems to tell two stories at once. For centuries, empires, conquerors, and pilgrims have come and gone, each leaving their own mark and claim. Crusaders once ruled here in the name of Christ. Ottoman sultans built their own mosques and schools, and modern Israelis and Palestinians continue to vie for sovereignty and recognition. But it is not only a political struggle, it is, at its heart, a question of spiritual legitimacy and identity. When Jewish families gather at the Western Wall to mourn the destruction of the temple and pray for its restoration, they are not just remembering the past, they are expressing a longing for the fulfillment of God's ancient promises. When Muslims gather by the thousands for Friday prayers at Al-Aqsa, they are enacting their connection to a lineage that, in their eyes, traces back through Ishmael to Abraham himself. Jerusalem's status is so contested because it sits at the intersection of memory, hope, and prophecy. For some, control of the city is the ultimate proof of God's favor, a visible sign that the covenant endures. For others, it is a sign of faithfulness and triumph, a testament to survival against all odds. Every conflict, every negotiation over Jerusalem's future is thus charged with more than politics. It is about whose narrative, whose destiny will be written in stone. Yet, in the midst of rivalry, Jerusalem also embodies the possibility of coexistence. For centuries, the city has been home to people of many faiths and cultures. In the narrow lanes of the old city, synagogues, churches, and mosques stand just steps apart. Shared markets, intertwined daily routines, and even moments of celebration and sorrow reveal that the spiritual descendants of Isaac and Ishmael are not always enemies. The city's history is not just one of conflict, but also of moments of peace, tolerance, and shared longing for something higher. Still, the struggle for Jerusalem is far from over. It remains a microcosm of the broader questions facing the descendants of Abraham. Can two peoples, each convinced of their own sacred story, find a way to honor the other's claim? Is it possible for ancient wounds to be healed and for the city of peace to truly become a place of reconciliation? The answer to these questions is yet to be fully written. But as long as Jerusalem stands, its stones will continue to whisper of promise and rivalry, exile and return, hope and heartbreak, a story still unfolding at the very heart of two intertwined histories. For centuries, the descendants of Isaac and Ishmael have lived with the wounds of their ancient separation, echoes of rejection, rivalry, and the struggle for inheritance. Yet, woven through this tapestry of conflict are rare but powerful moments of reconciliation, small signs that even the deepest wounds are not beyond healing. The Bible itself offers a surprising glimpse of this hope. After decades apart, the two estranged brothers, Isaac and Ishmael, appeared together once more at a critical moment, the burial of their father Abraham. Genesis records simply, his sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah. The brevity of this verse is striking, yet its significance is profound. For that brief moment, the sons of Abraham are united not by rivalry, but by a common act of honor and mourning. Jewish tradition attaches great meaning to this reunion. It notes the order of the names. Isaac and Ishmael. This, commentators say, shows that Ishmael, the elder, allowed Isaac, the heir, to be named first, an act interpreted as a gesture of acceptance, even reconciliation. For some, this moment is more than just a historical footnote. It is a prophecy, a symbolic promise that one day the descendants of these brothers might also find their way back to each other. These ancient seeds of hope have at times blossomed in the modern world. In recent years, what seemed impossible has slowly begun to unfold. Arab nations entering into open, peaceful relations with Israel. The signing of the Abraham Accords in 2020 by countries such as the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain marked a turning point in Middle Eastern diplomacy. For the first time, the language of peace was not based solely on politics or security, but on the shared heritage of Abraham himself, the common patriarch of both Jews and Arabs. The symbolism of the name Abraham Accords cannot be overstated. It was a conscious choice, reaching back to the shared roots of faith and family, and forward toward a future where those roots might support a new kind of relationship. The Accords do not erase the pain of the past or solve every dispute, but they do represent a powerful step toward breaking the cycle of enmity, an acknowledgement that what unites these peoples can at times be stronger than what divides them. Reconciliation has not been limited to politics. Deep within the spiritual traditions of both Judaism and Islam lie movements that speak a similar mystical language, one that transcends boundaries and seeks direct union with the divine. Jewish Kabbalists and Muslim Sufis, each in their own way, describe the soul's journey as a path through many levels or worlds, ultimately longing to return to the source, the infinite light of God. Both traditions speak of love for the divine that burns away the ego, dissolves the barriers of self and other, and seeks unity above all else. It is telling that throughout history, in places where Jews and Muslims lived side by side, shared mysticism often led to mutual respect and even collaboration. In medieval Spain, for example, Jewish and Muslim thinkers traded ideas and poetry, inspired by the same yearning for wisdom. In such moments, the descendants of Isaac and Ishmael became fellow travelers, pilgrims on the same road, speaking different tongues, but sharing a common longing. Of course, these moments of reconciliation are fragile and often fleeting. The pain of the original separation is deep, and each new generation inherits both the hopes and the hurts of those who came before. Political agreements can be undone. Spiritual awakenings can be forgotten. Yet, the story of Isaac and Ishmael's reunion at Abraham's tomb remains, like a seed beneath the soil, ready to sprout whenever conditions are right. Perhaps the greatest lesson is that reconciliation begins not on the world stage, but in the heart. Just as the brothers were brought together by mourning and love for their father, so too can modern descendants be moved by the recognition of shared ancestry and shared longing for peace. Every time an Israeli and a Palestinian, a Jew and a Muslim, choose to listen instead of fight, to mourn together rather than hate, they become living echoes of that ancient burial, a reminder that the past need not dictate the future. In a world that often seems trapped in cycles of violence, these glimpses of hope matter deeply. They remind us that the story of Isaac and Ishmael is not only one of division, but also of the possibility of reunion. If even for a moment the children of Abraham can come together in peace, then perhaps, just perhaps, the day will come when that peace becomes more than a memory, but a new beginning for generations to come. For millennia, the descendants of Isaac and Ishmael have carried the burdens of rivalry and division, echoing a story that began in the tent of Abraham and reverberates through today's headlines. Yet, within the biblical narrative lies not only a warning of conflict, but also a radical promise of peace, a hope that transcends bloodlines, ancient grievances, and even national identity. This promise, central to the Christian faith, offers a new way forward, not by choosing sides, but by building a new family where former enemies become brothers and sisters. The New Testament reveals this vision through the teachings of Jesus and the writings of the Apostle Paul. Unlike the ancient pattern of choosing one son over another, Christianity introduces a third path, a way to heal the wounds that have separated the children of Abraham for centuries. In Paul's letter to the Ephesians, he writes, "For Christ himself is our peace, who has made the two groups one and has destroyed the barrier, the dividing wall of hostility." Here, Paul is not only speaking to theological debate, but addressing a very real, centuries-old wall between Jews and Gentiles, a division that, in spirit, mirrors the ancient split between Isaac and Ishmael. This message is both radical and inclusive. Through Jesus, reconciliation is not limited to one nation or bloodline, but is open to all who would accept it. Paul continues, his purpose was to create in himself one new humanity out of the two, thus making peace, and in one body to reconcile both of them to God through the cross, by which he put to death their hostility. In other words, through faith in Christ, anyone, whether descended from Isaac or Ishmael, can become part of a new spiritual family. But how is this peace achieved? The Christian answer is not through politics, treaties, or even shared ancestry, and instead, it comes through a transformation of the heart, a willingness to forgive, to love one's enemies, and to see all people as created in the image of God. Jesus himself declared, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God." He called his followers not to avenge old wrongs, but to love even those who persecute them. Love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. This is not an easy path. The call to break down walls of hostility challenges generations of inherited pain, suspicion, and fear. It requires humility to admit that no one nation, Ipshibub, or tradition has a monopoly on truth or blessing. It asks the descendants of both Isaac and Ishmael to move beyond the story of competition and exclusion and embrace a deeper truth, that God's ultimate desire is not for one people to triumph over another, but for all to be reconciled to Him and to each other. Throughout history, there have been moments when this vision has broken through the darkness. Communities of Jews and Arabs, Christians and Muslims have found ways to live side by side, honoring their differences while recognizing a common humanity. In the early church, Jewish and Gentile followers of Jesus learned to worship and serve together, overcoming barriers that had stood for centuries. In modern times, grassroots peace movements, interfaith dialogues, and acts of simple kindness have all pointed to the possibility of a new beginning, a future not built on fear or revenge, but on forgiveness and mutual respect. Christian prophecy points forward to a day when this hope will be fully realized, a day when the wolf will dwell with the lamb, when they will not hurt or destroy on all my holy mountain, and when the Prince of Peace will rule with justice and compassion. The message is clear. The ancient feud that began between two brothers does not have to be humanity's final destiny. The invitation is open to lay down arms, to cross the boundaries that divide us, and to become peacemakers in a world that desperately needs healing. For those who long for an end to the cycles of violence, the story of Isaac and Ishmael offers both a sober warning and a shining hope. The pain of separation is real, and the journey toward reconciliation is difficult. But the promise remains. Through the love of Christ, a new family can be formed, a family not of blood or inheritance, but of faith, hope, and love. This is the path toward the peace that the world cannot give, but that God alone can bring. In the end, the question is not simply who inherits Abraham's promise, but who is willing to embrace Abraham's God of mercy and reconciliation. For it is in this embrace that true peace will be found, and the story of two brothers can become a testimony of redemption for all. The story of Isaac and Ishmael is more than ancient history. It's a living narrative that continues to shape our world. From the tents of Abraham to the modern streets of Jerusalem, the echoes of rivalry and the longing for reconciliation persist. This tale began with a promise and a heartbreaking separation, and it has unfolded across generations in both pain and hope. Yet, the Bible and history itself reminds us that division is not the only path. Isaac and Ishmael, despite years apart and deep wounds, were able to stand together, if only for a moment, at their father's tomb. Their reunion hints at a deeper possibility, that the children of Abraham are capable of something greater than conflict. Through moments of humility, shared sorrow, and the courage to forgive, there is always room for a new beginning. The choice remains before us, just as it did for those two brothers long ago. Will we continue to repeat cycles of fear, exclusion, and hostility, or will we choose the harder, braver path of reconciliation, recognizing our shared ancestry, common hopes, and the possibility of peace? The answer lies not only in political agreements or religious doctrine, but in each heart willing to embrace the other as family. In the end, the greatest legacy of Abraham is not merely the promise passed down through bloodlines, but the challenge to transform rivalry into reconciliation. This is the invitation and the hope that still calls out to us today.